Hello, my name is Jane, and I'm a member of the Soshimsa Zen Center. If you haven't heard, one of the many benefits of our Zen Center is a weekly podcast entitled The World Through Zen Eyes. You can find it on the soshimsa.org website. Just click on the podcast page. It's a conversation between our abbot, the Venerable Myong-an Sunam, and Dr. Reuben Lambert, a Buddhist monk. The subjects of their conversation vary from week to week and are often suggested by listeners. Our hosts discuss life questions and concerns within the timeless wisdom of the Buddha. Their discussions are friendly and informal, peppered with humor and personal experiences. All of this is done in a makeshift studio at the Zen Center. Equipment to bring this to all our listeners is very expensive to operate. Would you be willing to defray the cost with a small monthly donation at any level you can afford? Every penny donated goes directly into providing this wonderful service for our listeners. Please consider being as generous as you can so we can continue to educate, inspire, and entertain our listeners. Simply go to the Soshimsa webpage, click the podcast section, then support the podcast button. There you'll find the monthly option page. Click on the amount you wish to donate, and it's that simple. We hope you enjoy the lively conversation and benefit from the wisdom of our hosts. Don't forget to listen for the notification on your phone reminding you that the podcast is ready. And thank you for your support.
Welcome back to another episode of the World Through Zen Eyes podcast. I'm Myong-an Sunam here with
1 week older, reincarnated, and back again, Dr. Reuben Lambert.
welcome. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you too.
In your new form self.
In your new location, relatively speaking, to the stars and the planets.
The moon and the sun and all that. We have, this is kind of a build-up episode. So we're going to, karma is the main topic, but I will read you the listeners' questions or comments, if you will. So, and of course there are the comments and the requests for topics that come via the our website, or that takes you to the Buzzsprout page for the podcast.
What's the website?
Well, soshimsa.org.
Right.
You go to the podcast
But is there a direct page too?
It's if you Google, I think if you Google like the World to Zen Eyes podcast, the Buzzsprout page should come up as an option, and that's where the fan mail is. Of course, you're always welcome to send it through the website, and many of the questions have come through the Buzzsprout fan mail, but also a number of them come up in just person-to-person interaction with our members, or a text message, or things of that nature. So
we want to encourage everyone to continue to do that. Leave us comments.
Sure.
If there are any questions whatsoever.
And even in
drop us a line.
Yeah, even on YouTube. I mean, you could comment on YouTube.
Sure.
I believe you could comment on many of the platforms, I think.
Sure, yes.
So let's go chronologically. Let's see. Lovely podcast today. This is from May 16. Lovely podcast today. I have a suggestion. You mentioned karma. I am interested in finding out if we repeat our past karma for a reason. Are we aware that we are doing it? Also, is there a way that we can pay our karmic debt to become free of it?
I guess we'll start with a little humor again.
Well, hold on. That's the
Yeah.
one.
Oh, that's the one.
Yeah,
There's
that's
another one.
There's another one.
Oh,
So
another
this
one.
one,
Please go.
right. So
We
you
got a
mentioned
lot of-
karma. I'm interested in finding out if we. So it's the repeat of the karma, and do we know that we're doing it, and can we become sort of wipe the clay clean?
Tabula rasa,
Wipe the
as
clay clean.
Sigmund Freud used to say.
Right, and I say wipe the clay clean because it's not clean clay, or however
Clean
that goes.
slate.
That
Yeah.
see, and we have another one. Can we ever? So this is another listener asking, commenting. Can we ever know our karma? How can we work it out without knowing? Can we ever know if we paid our karmic debt? So what comes up so many times here, but this is not unusual. This line of questioning and thinking of karma is a very common thing. You had a
So a 17-year-old did really well in
had a
school,
joke?
and on his birthday, he opens the garage, and there was a bow in the car, and he says to his mom,
a bow.
a bow, like a birthday bow on the car
Oh, okay.
on his 17th birthday. That's the age they get their driver's license. So he looks at the bow, and he looks at his mom, and says, oh, is that my new karma?
Oh,
Incoming dad joke. Dun,
very
dun,
good.
dun,
And
dun.
and then there was that famous one, my karma ran over your dogma.
Oh, that's a
Right.
good one.
Yes. That's I think good start. You probably lost half the audience by now with these dead jokes, but no, they are fun and meaningful too. So let's start with, as we
Defining the
tend to do, defining the
terms.
terms.
Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
There should be like a little sound right now.
Yeah,
We're going to
what is the
defining the
sound of defining the
terms.
terms? Yeah. We need a DJ. So
Yes.
the very common interpretation of karma is that it's sort of action that we have done that is then stored somewhere, and we carry that, like the word debt comes up frequently, right? So we create some, usually divided to negative and positive karma, and how those things are stored, and how do we pay it back. And it's a reasonable way to think about it. It's a common way that people do think about it. It needs refining, and it's sort of linear, that division of the duality of good and bad is in there, and all those things. So we'll hack away at some of those things, not because they are. Well, I myself use the term karma in that kind of context. So we have to
Well, it's
understand, right?
becoming like what? Like a common...
Like Zen. Yeah, you're
use
so
it enough.
Zen.
Yeah,
You're so
use
Zen.
it enough. It creates... You get new meaning.
Yeah.
Right, so we can go backwards to forward. What is the original meaning?
Mhm.
How is it used in a common manner today?
Right.
So
You're so Zen. Usually
So Zen,
to
yeah.
mean you're so calm. You're so calm, and
right.
I don't know that Zen is calm, or at least
That's
in
another episode.
What?
Of
Yes.
what is
know.
real Zen and
Yeah.
things like that, right? Like that's another misnomer. I think
Yeah.
that people.
So, first and foremost, karma, or op, is what we call it in Korean. Op, karma, simply means action.
And in everyday
Period.
Korean language, there's when you meet someone, you can say hello. What kind of, I guess,
What's your
service?
job?
What's your job
Mhm.
in society? And it uses the word up
Yeah.
too, right?
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Yeah,
how
so
that-
it's like what the literal translation is sort of what kind of karma are you making now, type of thing.
Right.
So-
what's your day-to-day action that you put into the system we call society, right?
Yeah, and piling, because that's the other term, that like ancient way of greeting, in a sense, or comments from a monk would not be 성불 하십시오, simply means reach enlightenment. It means the other one would be just how much piling are you doing? What you're piling?
What kind of?
Or you're stockpiling?
What are you collecting?
Yeah,
Yes.
and so stockpiling of, hopefully we want the good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so karma, just the word itself, a standalone op means action.
Mm-hmm.
Action that then we divide into three, right? Three karmas. So we have the karma of the action of the body action, the action of the speech karma, and the action of the speech or the function or the action of the mind.
Thought.
So mind karma, body karma, speech karma can be divided in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, then we get into the sort of details. Well, mind creates and the body and the speech follows that, and there's nuance in it, etc., etc. But generally speaking, that's it. Karma is what you do with your mind, what you do with your body, what you do with your speech. Then we have a term called opjang. Jang is a container, like a jar, a storage chest, if you will. So container. And this is where the usual misuse of it comes in. This is not scolding, by the way. You're using it wrong, right? So we have op as an action, and then we have opjang, which is a kind of jar in which all of the actions are collected. We're stockpiling something. And these two are usually is what's kind of used interchangeably, right? So people say, oh, somebody falls down, they say, oh, you have bad karma, right? And somebody falls down, they have bad karma, suggests a punishment, in a sense, right? Suggests this debt,
personal,
right? This debt and some almost like a godlike personal vendetta against you, like you get shoved into a puddle of mud, while wearing a white suit, and then we look at it kind of very kind of linear, and they say, oh, because when I was 5, I had a friend that I pushed and he fell and he got his pants dirty and he got home, he got a whooping from his mom, and so we think, oh, well, that. And now here, and they say, aha, the debt is satisfied. It's and frequently we do speak of those kind of ways in which it's that the debt is paid in a sense with the same currency, right? But if you consider the complexity of life and the interconnectedness of things, it's not a singular kind of tether that connects one particular behavior necessarily and only to that same kind of behavior on the other end of it. Like if I've shoved some kid, my friend, when I was a child, and he fell and then I got home and got in trouble for it, then shoving
would then be the return.
Right. So now I must get shoved for shoving somebody, and albeit sometimes that is kind of the possibility, right? But we do have to consider this complexity of essentially what is a kind of a spider web or a net, that if you tug at it on one side of a net, so many parts of the net move along with it to varying degrees, right? So you could let's say if you had that magic kind of trick, not magic trick per se, but with that set table and the tablecloth, and how swiftly you could kind of swipe the tablecloth and not knock over all the things. If you kind of yank on it, chances are some things will just be shifted, some things maybe will not be shifted, and some things will fall over, if you haven't completely kind of swiped it off the table. So this is, I think, a good way to consider karma and that kind of a connection. It's not necessarily you get shoved for shoving, you get pushed for pushing, Underlying that linear kind of thing of you get shoved for shoving, it's the resulting suffering, right? Or benefit. But so the flavor, if you will, of suffering. In a sense, it's, let's say suffering is bitter.
Mm-hmm.
And so various degrees of bitterness are available, but generally speaking, let's say it in this example, that all suffering is bitter
Mm-hmm.
to varying degrees. And it doesn't have to be a bitter melon. It could be a bitter strawberry. It could be a bitter whatever,
Mm-hmm.
right? Bitter is the point, not the exact thing that is it's the bitterness of it. So not
Right.
necessarily shoving, shoving for eye for an eye kind of thing, but eye for a kidney also works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like there could be a bitter fruit that is your return, but the container in which it travels to you could be different. It could be on a plate. It could be in a box. It could be on a giant leaf.
Yeah.
All of that can vary.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Water.
have to be exactly. I think when we think linear, we get trapped into the sense of logical reasoning.
Sure.
Right. And some of these things, when they enter the sphere of the unknown and the mystery realm, logic just doesn't apply there in that realm.
Right.
So we can give some examples and things like that and there is a portion actually where there's the immediate return, right? Where that might be able to give people a direct understanding of almost like the physics behind, actions and the return or cause and effect. But that's just, one leaf in a forest of possibilities, right? So
the idea of karma, we could say, is sort of seed, because it's related to in-kwa or in-kwa ungbo. In-kwa, in is the seed, kwa is the fruition of it. Right. Ungbo are like the conditions. So usually translated as causes and conditions type of thing. Which expands on this linear kind of singular theta, right? And also this is a very important thing to mention, that it is largely due to that linear tethering of cause and effect, in the way, like you said, that we logically expect it to be, that people find let's call it the believing in karma challenging. Right? Because if there is such a, almost nearly a physical, tangible tether, right? And it says, well, look at that person. That person's a bully. Look at that person's abusive. That person's doing this thing, but they've gone away with it. And where's the tether? Where's the karma? Where's the cause and effect? Where are all these things?
People ask that question oftentimes when they see these types of situations. Where's the justice?
Right.
And they get lost sometimes, and people sometimes feel a sense of misery, a sense of being betrayed because, the action hasn't arrived yet to that person.
And we have to consider that what they're looking for is not justice. What they're looking for frequently is revenge, in some expression of it. And also what they're looking for is justice as they see just, right? As they would like to see the thing done,
applied,
which is kind of like, you chop off a thief's hand for stealing kind of thing, right? You use the hand to steal, so chop it. And this is where we get into, well, he used the mind to steal, and the hand was innocent.
The hand just followed the orders of the mind, right?
Yeah.
And the hand is just meat and nerves and muscles.
So and then what it's punishment and revenge versus education. And we could go down the rabbit hole, because there's layers and layers and severities of transgressions of one man against another and all that kind of thing. But the point is, the justice, as we would like it to be enacted, makes then us, sort of puts us in the position of being the judge, and hardly Is it our work and our job to be the judge of things?
Well, one can argue then at that moment, well, there would be a natural flow, like of karmic events that would occur. Let's say if a person did steal something, and that is like let's say there's a ripple effect, no different than if you throw a rock into a lake. That happens all of itself. But when the person now enters into, let's say, the system, the order of the system, and imposes a judgment, now you've created some karma there too that
Sure.
you're going to be responsible for.
Yeah, being judgmental and
Yeah.
yeah, it's
So-
it's I could
Versus kind of accepting and understanding the law of Ingwa cause and effect, and allowing it to come to fruition.
it's a
as
whole
it
different
as it does.
it's a whole different
It's
now
very
we're
different,
we're
yeah.
entering into a
but
whole
we
other
can-
thing, which is part of it. Absolutely. I
Sure.
mean, we meander, right?
Hmm.
Because what then creating of the judgmental mindset, yeah, that funny joke of some people are so judgmental. I could just tell by looking at them,
Right.
holier than thou,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So to circle back to it, so we have the action of mind, body, and speech. We'll call that karma. Then we have the collection of said, the stockpiling of those things. Then we have to consider the rather complex system, the net of intertwined, interwoven strings and tethers and lines and things of that nature, psychological, physiological, all of that makes it a rather complex network, which, like we said, tends to make it challenging for people to accept that, justice, in a sense, it's served. And yeah, because we have this concept of the eye for an eye. So if unless an eye is taken out for an eye, then it doesn't count. But like I said, well, how about a kidney for an eye, or a spleen for an eye, or a heart for an eye, or whatever for an eye? It could get all kinds of there's a value. So another way to think of it is we could think of a currency, right? A X amount of lira, an X amount of rupees equates to X amount of dollars, to X amount of shillings, whatever it is. There's an exchange rate, but underlying it, there's a value, and the value gives you purchasing power, but it's expressed in a different currency, in a sense. And so just because you've shoved your best friend at childhood who has fallen and then went home and got a whooping and yelling and couldn't play for a week because you ruined the Sunday best, doesn't mean that now the repercussions of it has to be verbatim in your life.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the same exact thing. Are the instances where it is? Absolutely. I mean, if you punch somebody, they're likely to punch you. Are they going to punch you in the same place in your face? Are they going to punch your face? They might kick you. They might elbow you. They might knee you. They might, take a bar stool across your head or
Or see
whatever.
that you love your car, and instead of hitting you back,
Key your cars or
they know
blow
that,
out the
yeah.
windows, whatever. Yeah. So it's there's a transfer of energy there, and also that kind of energy is neither created nor destroyed. It just changes form. It's kind of applicable to this karmic thing. So it's not necessarily eye for an eye.
right?
So hopefully that makes sense. Right? Now, not only is it not necessarily eye for an eye, but then what we also have is the time. 시절 the season of sprouting.
Right.
You think of it as the season of sprouting. Not all seeds planted in your garden sprout at the same time. Tomatoes and your cucumbers and your cherry, your whatever,
They all
your
have
arugula, they all have their
yeah.
own time of sprouting, depending on their sort of DNA makeup, if you will.
I just told a patient yesterday about this. He is kind of caught up in this cycle where he feels a little down and depressed because he hasn't come into his own fruition based on his efforts at his job. He hasn't received the promotion that he wishes to receive. And I told him some people are tomatoes, some people are apples. Some people come into their own and receive the rewards for their actions in 90 days like tomatoes, right? They come
Right.
fairly quick. And what apple trees takes about 5 years for, not
And then we
everything
have
has the same return rate.
right, and then we have that other complexity of each individual person's uniqueness. And so a tomato is not a tomato is not this. You and I could go to the store, buy the same tomato plant, and we could go home into our individual gardens and plant it, and then we check in. It's like, oh, I'm getting tomatoes, and the other person's like,
What's
I'm
going
not.
on? Yeah.
Right? Because why? I mean, it's the same plant. So that is to say, we could say same action, same seed, right? Of the same variety, same everything. I mean, we could live, you could plant those even in your own gardens. You could plant those, if you plant it 12 feet apart, it's going to potentially make a difference, because if your pH of the soil, to the right of your plot, and you planted something else, that other plants that then alter the pH and the nutrient content of the soil, and then 12 feet to the left, you're planting the same tomato, they might very well grow different rates at different speeds,
Sure.
flourish or not flourish. So
Ultimately, right, it's like, what are those specific conditions when you have a question? We're giving a general overcast
right,
of the way, karma or opchang can work in somebody's life, right? But for the specifics,
right,
you have to know exactly, it's like, how long will this tomato plant take to grow? Right. Well, what kind of soil, what
Right.
kind of sun, how
Yeah.
frequently do you water it? Right. That's so specific.
Yeah, is your house
Before
blocking the sun?
yeah, is your house blocking the sun?
Sure.
Before that, we can say, yeah, in general, on average,
Right.
right. But for the actual genome or true experience,
Right.
you have to be there and experience it for what it is.
And that's
Yeah.
the ingwa ungbo. Ingwa means seed, and the fruition of the seed.
Right.
Ungbo are the surrounding conditions in which this is happening, right?
Okay.
So it's tomato plant, right? It's good, or tomato seed. It's going to fruit a tomato, but depending on now all the other surrounding causes and conditions, whether numerous, right? Then those two situations are going to vary, and there's,
Do you want to go through these
nameless
four? I
condition.
believe. Do you want to
Yeah,
through
we'll
them?
go through them to give a little bit more of a idea. Now, there's that famous story of a monk seeking to reach a temple, and has been walking for however many days. Not He's just it's a long journey, and he finally sees the kind of end of the journey sort of coming, and as he's walking, he sees a farmer, and he asks the farmer, how long to such and such temple? And the farmer looks up and says, walk. And the monk's like, no, I'm asking how long to the such and such temple. Walk. How long to the such and such temple? Walk. Right? And so he gets upset, starts walking, and the farmer looks up and is like, 40 minutes. Right?
Right.
Because how long? That's the same thing.
Yeah.
That's
What's
your client,
pace?
right?
What's your race?
We say it all the time, yeah. How long till I get... Well, at what pace?
Yeah.
How fast are you walking? Are you planning a break? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? It's going to vary. So how long to the temple is going to depend on the various causes and conditions. Now, having said that, so we have... Wow, this is very organized today. We have the action. That's the karma. We have the container of the action we call objang. We've established that those are sometimes used independently, or interchangeably. Sometimes what we mean is you have bad karma. We mean, generally speaking, what that means is you've collected what stockpile do you have, and then
Right.
we have to kind of I believe it was I don't know, was it Al Capone? There was one of the famous mobsters that was finally imprisoned, and even his prison cell, I think, was like Bellagio style. He had couches and a TV and whatever, when everybody else's was, barren cells and
Yeah.
yeah,
I
right?
forget what movie. There was a movie which was based on a true story. I forget if it was Goodfellas or one of those mobster things. And
Yeah.
they were living it up in prison. They had everything they needed.
Right,
And
and
it was like penthouse suite in there.
yeah, and I think that he was finally busted for, I don't know, he shot dead, I don't know, Tommy, and I think it was like the first night, or I don't recall the details of the story. I frankly don't care about details of stories largely.
Right. Just the points.
That's the point that
Are
they
they good
make.
points or bad points?
I use language
most
the way
important.
the way that was quoted in Humpty Dumpty, that I use words for them to mean what I mean them to mean, or something to that effect.
Yes.
And anyway, so come nightfall, the guards hear this guttural, feared screams,
I believe that was Al
and
Capone.
howling,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, "What in the world's going on?"
Mm-hmm.
They get to the cell. And he says, "Tommy, it's Tommy, it's Tommy." So he was essentially haunted by, whether in kind of supernatural haunting ways, or psychological haunting ways, or schizophrenia, or dementia. I don't care what. He was tormented, but when we look at it from outside, we could say, he kind of got away with it, even while in jail. And then we could say, well, he's having a glimpse of what his future is like.
Yes.
Future meaning after this life, the next future. And we've talked about reincarnation and its various forms. And we have to remember that this opjang, the storage, the stockpile container of our karma, is akin to the black box on an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
The airplane goes down, crashes into bits and smithereens. You take the black box, you install it in another airplane. Now that airplane has that same. It's
the same. Every
same
single thing
right
that the airplane did
is there,
is stored there.
Or like the content of your computer. You change the computer, but you want your stuff in it, or your phone. Like, I want my contacts. When I change a phone, I need my contacts changed and my apps and all of that. How interesting that this is what the technology is kind of coming out. I mean, it's out, but it's developing in that direction of what, from the Zen perspective, already is. It's just a material, physical, technological manifestation of that which is already existing. And the idea there is that nothing, in a sense, is invented. It's just rediscovered. It's already existing. So this idea of cloud, and we've talked about the Aryashik, and the consciousness, the storehouse consciousness, and that kind of thing. So, yeah, lifetime to lifetime. Now, for a nice and tidy episode as this has been, there are 4, as you said, right? So we've established in-qua is the cause and effect, or the seed and the fruition. Ungbo are the causes, are the conditions, that surround it. Now, we have Chonin Chongwa, Chonin Umgwa, Hyonin Hyongwa, Hyonin Umgwa. And
I love these. Go ahead.
Yes. So, and sort of yin yang kind of thing. Think of it yin yang. And yin yang or yang, think of that then as a table. What's on the table? What's under the table?
Mm-hmm.
Right, that's a good image. So
Sure.
yin and yang, right? What is under the table, that is
You can see what's
visible,
on top.
right?
Underneath, you cannot see.
Yes, visible by everybody. Underneath is as if it were another realm, kind of the hidden side, dark side, the night side, the unknown kind of thing. So we have the top of the table, on the table, under the table. And this is how we further can understand the complexity and why it's sometimes a trap to think of karma, and it's kind of fruition as this eye for an eye. And if it's not eye for an eye, see, there's no karma.
Mm-hmm.
Because on the table, cause. On the table, result. On the table, cause. Under the table, result.
Right. Let me just give you two I just thought of.
Yes.
Imagine a whole dinner setup, right?
Uh-huh.
And I knock down your drink, and then you go and everyone sees that's sitting at the table,
Right.
and then you go and grab the person next to you's drink, and you throw it at my face.
Right.
Everybody sees.
It's all in the public
It's
or
all
in the known.
right.
It's
Everyone
all
saw
obvious. Yes.
that I knocked down your drink, and everyone saw that you threw the drink back at me.
Very good.
Another one is I knocked down your drink. Everyone saw that. Then you kicked me under the table.
And I kick you under the table. Right.
Nobody could see that.
Your shin knows
But my
you're in
shin
pain.
knows.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the seen or visible, and the cause visible, and the result is visible.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I knock over you, think it's sort of tit for tat, eye for an eye, we could even say. Right. Then there's the visible cause, invisible result. So people see that, I've knocked over your thing. People don't see that I've
You've kicked me.
kicked you in the shin.
Mm-hmm.
And again, so now, if we leave it at that, consider the countless perspectives that people then have on it, right? Oh, he did, so he did. I spilled your thing, you threw water, that, okay. And people will say, that is justice. Kind of,
Because they saw
whatever, right?
It
they
was
see,
exposed
and it's
to their
right.
eyes, and they were able to connect the dots.
Yes. So justice has been reenacted, right? And so that may be satisfactory to people. It's like, okay, well, you did that, and now you did that, and everybody could go home and sleep well. Now, we do that water in the face, boot to shin that is unseen, and then that could leave people at the table going, oh, no justice has been served.
That's almost then like Al Capone being in like a penthouse suite in the prison,
Right.
and people can't see his
shin.
experience.
The torment. He was in hell, didn't
People
sleep,
can't see
howling.
that. Right.
Right. Yeah. So we have that. So the boot to shin, unknown, is the result of the cause known. 천인 전과 현인 현과 천은 천인 전과 현인 현인 전과 현인 천인
I gotcha.
So option two. No, I'm technically
Three.
option three. Shin. I
kick you
boot
under the
to
table.
shin.
Under the table.
I throw the water in your
Throw it on my
face.
face. I think this is a common one because then what does the crowd say, or how do they react at that moment? They can't
I've
believe
attacked.
it.
I've attacked
they can't
you.
believe it. They don't know where this came from.
Right.
Because the cause is hidden.
Right. So they think like this guy just rudely threw water in the other person's face, unjustly, without any sort of causality seemingly. Right.
I think this one is the hardest one for some people to comprehend, and maybe this ties into this idea of like my cause, and this might be a little bit of a tangent. We don't have to go there, but I just want to highlight it here. I did something in my past life. Today I receive the effect, and it comes out of nowhere. And people oftentimes ask themselves, my God, why is this happening to me now?
Yep.
because you cannot see the cause
The But to
that
Shin.
was hidden.
Yeah.
But we know from the law of karma that there was a cause.
We know
Otherwise,
from the
this
law
wouldn't
of
have
the
come.
universe
Well,
that
right.
there's a
Newton said the
cause.
same thing,
Right.
and you just got to observe the world and the universe, and you could see that principle at play there.
And so what is the warping element is our ego.
Because and another thing too, it's all the ego can come into play, and then hinder you from working past that moment and finding a way to release yourself from that karma. This might answer some of the other people's questions, because the ego at that moment feels maybe angry. Why
Right,
did this
it takes
happen to
everything
me?
personally.
Or guilty, like some guilty, shameful, feeling persecuted, like something is punishing me, and all of those hinder your ability to have the perspective or the view of wisdom to be able to work through this situation in a healthy manner that can free yourself, unbind you from. Because oftentimes, what do? We put back into the system the same thing that was done unto me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't like it, but then we now have to relive that once again, over and over again. But again, that might be.
No, it's absolutely so, and it's that idea of I am innocent that is kind of as a backdrop of that. Right? I am innocent. Why? I was just sitting here. Nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
This is people watching this thing unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I put to shin you. You wanted to face me, and one of us is viewed by the group as the attacker, and without a cause,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the other is viewed as a victim. And now, if you have if this is a kind of on one's personal level, the ego is going to always gravitate towards I am innocent,
Right.
you know, because even
That's
if
gonna
I've
make
done
you-
it in anger, even
Right.
if I've done a thing in anger, then the ego will then search out for justifications for my anger. And so this is, I am simply rebalancing the scales.
I think a good way to handle that, I'm going to take a situation that I witnessed with Unsanim, our teacher, and Bokchon, one of his students, where he asked a question somewhere along the lines like, how could this accident, let's say, happen to you when you do so much meditation, so much Kido, so much prayer? And his answer to me is brilliant and genius. And he says, at one time, today I have light, today I have wisdom, but at one time I was Mumyon.
Right.
And I think that goes for everyone across the board. At one time, in the way past, I was ignorant. I didn't know better, right?
Sure.
But I still have to, if I did something, even though I was mumyon and ignorant, I still have to experience the consequences.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I think when you view it from that perspective, with those terms, it frees you from becoming angry, feeling persecuted, feeling like, oh, but I'm innocent. Why is this happening to me? All those unhealthy states of thinking and all those unhealthy emotional reactions that will not free you or unbind you from the karmic consequences. It will just further enhance and amplify whatever is tormenting you today. I like that response. Well,
absolutely. I mean, and then so we have that kind of causality is unknown and the result is known.
right.
So we're still I think we still have everybody hopefully on board. It's like, all right, you
Sure.
do some. It's above the table
Yes.
action and reaction. Above the table action, under the table reaction.
Right.
Under the table action, above the table reaction, and we only have one combination
One
left.
Right.
I kick you in the shin. This is the sibling thing, right? I kick you in the shin, you kick me in the shin, because mom and dad, if they see us punching each other and kicking each other, we'll both be in trouble. Sorry, I kick you, you kick me, I kick you, you kick me, I kick. Nobody at the table knows.
But they turn around and the parents look and everyone's folding their hands.
Very pious.
You
Very,
know?
yes,
Hands
yes.
folded, nobody did anything. Right.
Bleeding from
Yeah.
the shins. And so in those cases, it's the action, as we said, is hidden, and then the result, the reaction to is hidden. That is to say, a thief who steals from an empty house under the cover of the dark
Right.
gets away. Now, if we take into account the way that each individual person's already pre-existing karma collection in that karma jar, right? That they're what kind of a fertilizer they have for the seeds of the growth of their actions. So again, now we have another layer. So it could be very complicated and very thing. The main point is we cannot trace directly one thing to another. What we can, however, do is have this attitude, which is very challenging for people, granted, is that whatever befalls me is mine.
Right.
And it's not sort of woe is mine, because if I if I have something nice happen to me, it too is mine. So celebration isn't, also like you could enjoy it. It's not like, oh, it's, and also nor is it all predetermination, because now that's a whole other element. It's like, well, then if everything we've done, it's a cause and effect, then we have no choice then. That's not the case. That's a potential another topic of that free will business. But so again, we could consider if it's eye for an eye, or eye for a shin, right? Or eye for kidney, right? So it's not only in the way that we suffer, even when we think of the physical suffering and things of the karmic tethers, albeit so complicated, and they do not mean that the person is bad. They do not mean that the person was bad, right? Because then we say, well, I did a bedside visit to a gentleman once who asked, why me? He was riddled with brain tumors, riddled. And so this was hospice situation. But he exercised, he ate right, he ran 5Ks, numerous 5Ks. So, to sort of, I did all the things right, why me kind of situation. It's a oversimplification of the complexity of life. Because someone could, there are cancer doctors who'll say it's just one person could smoke their whole life and they'll be fine, and the other person has never smoked
and have lung
and
cancer.
get a lung cancer. So those kind of things. It's and this isn't to say now, and I want to really stress this to our audience who's listening. If you have lung cancer, do not even begin to occupy your mind with, oh, I must have done something bad. What did I do? And that's not what this is the point of. The point of it is everything has a sort of cause and effect. And in that web of the cause and effect, in this very moment, my karma, in the pure meaning of the word, namely that my action, is affecting that storage container of my priorly collected stockpiled karma. Now, to circle back to the questions that keep on coming back, namely, how do we, so let's go with can we pay back our karmic debt? No. It's not a matter of payback. Because pay back, then what do you return to? What state of your bank account do you return to when you've paid back? It's there. We did it. It's there. It's stored. Now, think of it more in terms of scales. that kind of typical, how much heavy karma negative, how much good karma negative you have. So what we are in ought to attempt is to create more of the positive thing,
Right.
create more good karma, and not concern ourselves with erasing bad karma. Storage house is a storehouse. It stores everything. Ariashic consciousness stores all of our actions, as we've mentioned before, good and bad.
If I can maybe highlight this with just a practical example, and it's not exactly the way it works, but it kind of gives the point. If you had just a large container, and in that container you had the option of collecting one of two things. One is seashells, which are very beautiful, and you may like them, and they're pretty, or the other one are rocks. And playing into the probability game, it's like, depending on how much you've collected, let's say you've collected 3 rocks to every seashell. If you think about it, if that's been what you've been doing throughout your lifetime, if you closed your eyes and stuck your hand into that container, what might you be more likely to pull out? A heavy rock or a beautiful seashell? If you notice that every time you put your hand in there, you have this heavy rock and you don't like that, well, you can't dump all the rocks. What can you do? Well, add more seashells. And then maybe a year or two, we don't know, whenever, you stick your hand in there, what do you pull out? A nice, beautiful seashell, right? So it's, on a practical sense, like you're saying, in that scale, once you grow in wisdom and you understand these laws, these concepts that we're explaining here, well, what can you do to better your situation if you just feel like everything that comes to you is against you, or isn't what you wish for, or you're working so hard and you're not getting what you want?
So now, to piggyback on that, what we then have is the question, can we know our karma? And so that question still lives in that perspective on karma, as in what the question asks is, can we know the container, opjang, not op, but opjang? Can we know the storehouse of our karma? Yes. Forget about it.
To that.
Forget about it. Yeah, forget about it. What is a more necessary thing to do is, as you are acting out your life, wakefulness, and we talk about it ad nauseum, right? Wakefulness is your key here. That is to say, when I begin saying something, when I begin doing something, when I begin thinking something, those mind, body, and speech karmas, right? When I begin, I have to recognize how much of a habit energy is involved in that. Because those rocks that you've mentioned create a sort of habituation.
A magnetic pull towards it.
So we have a habitual way of living on a physical level. I mean, if you eat your lunch at a certain time, you don't ever have to think about lunch. Your stomach juices and your bile excretions going to kind of burn your stomach to say we're expecting food, because if you go to sleep at a certain time, you're likely to be sleepy. So there's a habitual energy. We could say that is part of this whole karmic network.
Sure.
This is also true emotionally, which is why emotional intelligence is such a critical thing that we try to develop, right? If you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, how many abusive relationships do you have to go through to realize I keep getting myself into these relationships, which then I end up being, hurt by. So how late in the game do I wake up to it? Right? Or can I recognize the pattern? Can I recognize the habitual kind of proclivity towards being drawn to a certain person, a certain type of personality, whatever? And so in that state of wakefulness is where the interruption in the karmic habitual energies happens. And this is how we address the past karma. Not because we can't go into the past and do anything there, right? So to and then there's this other understanding or this kind of flight of fancy to say, this thing happened to me. And this usually is connected to that linear, very simplistic perspective. I was in a car accident I was coming to the temple, and somebody was rushing and shoved me, and I fell. And then we have a memory. Oh, little Johnny, when I was a kid, I remember I pushed him. This is kind of the phantom of little Johnny, kind of reenacting his karmic sentence upon me. Forget
Those
it.
connections,
Forget it. Right.
drawing those connections have no value for when it comes to bettering
Right.
or improving your life.
And we have so many stories that are kind of simplistically like that, right? But we have to remember that is not the only expression of it that happens. And when we fall victim to this thinking that it must be kind of verbatim, then we miss something else, because then we find in other circumstances, it says, well, I've never pushed anybody into the puddle of mud. So I was, kind of faultless in being pushed or shoved. Right? But we said the currencies exchange at various different levels. So
And all that does is just create a ripple of doubt in your heart, and that's going to make you not believe in whatever
It's
system
mess.
you're practicing, whatever you thought was happening or you were engaging in to better your life. You're going to suddenly eject yourself out of that, all because it didn't make logical sense to you at that very moment. You couldn't connect the dots.
yeah,
That's some asang right there to
asang ego, yeah.
ego. That's some very strong ego.
And it is, that's the thing. These frequently what we get with these kind of perspectives is a fanciful reorganization of the mundane, less fancy flavor of suffering. A suffering on account of some spiritual principle is no different than suffering on account of some, very kind of materialistic, gross principle of suffering. If you've, this ideas that are intertwined into spirituality and religions and those things are not outside and not available to getting mixed into the gears, the great gears that make us suffer on a day-to-day basis. So now I've learned about karma. For what purpose? For what reason? What are you to do with the information that we just spent, however many, 50 minutes probably talking about, right? So it's not to plunge a person deeper into suffering. It's not to cause, now some depressive state of, oh, this is my life and these are the situations, and so I must have been a horrible person in my past life, and consider if you have a glimpse of your past life. And it's like, I was,
Cleopatra.
I was Cleopatra. Everybody that has a glimpse so far
everyone says that
Cleopatra.
for some reason.
Everybody's a Cleopatra, right? I was a woman stealing in the supermarket Sprite. For what? Why? What does that mean to me today? So
I really love your point of wakefulness. I think that's a very significant and an important skill I think our audience should try to cultivate. Of course, Pulgyo Buddhism teaches that through the practice of meditation. Right? And you've given an example in past podcasts that I think is also relatively a good point here. Is the one from the Dhammapada, where a village that is sleeping when the tsunami comes in at night is just everything is washed away.
swept. Yeah.
So I guess just to make two different points there is like, one, if you wake up in the middle of that and you weren't sleeping, right? You're wakeful. You can do so. You can now swim. You can survive. But even better, which is I think the goal that we work towards, is let's say like the fire tower or the mountaintop effect, where you see it from a high point, and then you can see it much earlier before the tsunami gets there, and then there you can plan, you can take out the things that you value, you can rescue other people, so forth and so on. So the wakefulness point, though, I think is important, is waking up and being able to
that's where life happens.
The tide and the flow of your life.
Right. So no matter what the karma element of our past karma is, no matter what the and so we didn't even get into the sort of karma producing fortune, because that's really the kind of cause and effect. But they're it's good enough, I think.
I think it's good enough. And Bulio does have another remedy for this, and it's boshi. And that's something I think we have to also address in future episodes too.
Absolutely. I mean,
the
that
temple
is
a
that
ground
is
for
the
people
understanding.
to cultivate generosity. The Buddha, after his enlightenment, what did he have his disciples do? Because he felt very compassionate towards the people in the villages who were very poor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He had them go out and beg.
Yeah.
To help
7
them.
houses on each
Right,
trip.
so-
Right. Don't discriminate between the houses,
So
a
that's-
shack or a mansion or whatever. Who people give what they can give, and I frequently when I speak on this idea of the begging bowl, I like to say that it's full to the brim with fortune. And it's that displacement thing, kind of eureka. It's like how, you
Drop
get in a
something
bathtub and what amount of water spills out. And so that's the thing. But it's opportunity for, creating karma, kind of snowing over the let's call it the bad karma, to cover up the bad karma with good karma. That's or tip the scales, if you want to go with that.
And you could really turn that between Muja Chilshi Boshi, Muju Samboshi, Yuju Samboshi, the exchange of all the different types, clothing, pop boshi, different. I mean, that could be a whole.
That could be an episode
right there.
Yeah, on generosity and the 12 or so various divisions of it. Absolutely, it is important to understand that only in the state of wakefulness and the self-awareness that we could alter karma. Sitting and dwelling on it, sitting and even frankly sitting and pondering it is for nothing. Because the pondering of it is either pondering thing of the past, and it's wake up to your life in the here and now. When you are awake, like you said, you could catch the thief.
Yeah.
And the thief here being our karmic habituated mode of operation that perpetuates a certain way, and it plunges us again and again and again repeatedly into the same set of causes and conditions.
And the person who is mindless and not aware continuously responds to that same situation that triggered an emotional or a behavioral response, thinking this is the way I must be or this is the way I must act. When the wool is pulled over your eyes and you're not wakeful and you cannot see the causes and conditions or what your karmic, and that could be emotional, mental, or speech habits that you've formed and created throughout your life, you're just responding and thinking, well, this is what I know, this is how I must act, and then the return is just like a merry-go-round or Ferris wheel with someone going around there with their hand sticking out, just slapping you in the face, and then you slap them back, and then the hand comes around again, and you have no idea why this is occurring, because you're not aware of where in this continuum you can interrupt. We want to interrupt it and then start a new flow going into a positive, hopeful direction so that your life can be better and improve.
Yes, sir. I am Young Anselim. Until next time. Take care of yourselves and each other.
I'm Dr. Ruben Lambert, from my heart to yours. Subscribe and like. And if you like what you hear, please, please, please tell somebody about it. Don't keep this a secret. Don't keep it under the table. Bring it to the top so that everybody can see how good it is.